All right, welcome back to the program. Paul Alaje, the lead economist at SPM Professionals, joins me right now. Hello, Paul, and welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you so very much for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. Let's get started. Uh, you've seen the report from the National Bureau of Statistics. Can you please unpack those numbers, what it really means that Nigeria's inflation is soaring? It soared to 21.09% in October from 20.77% in September. What does this really mean? And the other numbers that we got from the NBS, if you can do that in about 2 minutes, then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, well, from the figures released by the NBS, it reveals that the value of money in Nigeria is reduced. I mean, it's reducing. That means what money can buy in Nigeria is reducing from what we have seen in 2021 year-on-year comparison, even also or month-on-month. The value of what you can buy in the market is reducing. And if I can break it down, if you permit me, if I can break it down further into sectorial analysis, according to the Bureau of Statistics, um, you see some sectors that have been badly affected, even though we saw improvement in some other sector. Most of the sectors are affected, and we have seen the urban inflation, and we have also seen the rural inflation. There are several parts that inflation has affected. It includes food inflation, it includes core inflation for the month of October. On year basis, urban inflation rate was 21.63%, which was 5.11% higher compared to 16 that was recorded in 2021. What it means is that the theater of inflation now may be at the urban center, unlike what we used to see at rural inflation. More things are getting more expensive by over 5% in the urban centers. And we need to speak to this because a lot of people are still rushing to urban center, and rather than having inflation, even at the rural area, if you look at rural inflation, it increased to 20.57% compare, and it's also 5% higher. When you look at both for rural inflation, it went by 5.09% from 15.48% that was recorded in 2021. On month-on-month basis, rural inflation was 1.61%, but which was down by 0.11% compared to what we had in September 2021. So, but by and large, for both those living in rural areas and those living in urban center, inflation seems to be giving us japping. It's to be giving us uppercuts on our side, below the belt, in the face, everywhere. These inflation figures projection that increase even in near future.
Paul, if we take a look at our inflation, is it still right for us to say that Nigeria's inflation is still driven by external factors?
Well, to a large extent, I would say that Nigerian inflation is driven by external factor and internal factor. This is because I deliberately zeroed in on both urban and rural. Urban, because most of the things we consume in our urban center are imported, and it is expected that what we consume in rural are produced more locally. It affects food and so on and so forth. So we have and when you look at the growth rate for both, they are both 5%. So as a producer myself, I can tell you the price of inputs that are imported, such as cost of energy, which is imported, and I'm referring to diesel, has remained high. We have also seen in the month of October, the price of PMS has increased in most states, including the FCT, where you saw queues. So because of all of these, they have imports-driven inflation. On the other side, you have seen urban, rural, because of insecurity, because of logistic transport. So those are also there. So if you, so for me, I think it affects both import-driven and local in terms of policy, they are responsible for what we have seen in inflation growing to about 21.09, I mean 21.09%, as released by the National Bureau of Statistics.
With inflation numbers that have just come out, and the Monetary Policy Committee meeting will start on Monday and end on Tuesday, are there fears that perhaps the central bank might raise interest rates again? At the last meeting, interest rates was hiked to about 15.5%. Do you think that the Central Bank of Nigeria's MPC would increase rates again to tame this inflation that refuses to hold its brakes?
Well, I think central bank, we have to make any of these two options. The first option on the table is to increase rates. And when you look at most central banks in the last 2 months, they have also been increasing rates, even though some have left rates the same. But it's very rare to see a central bank reducing rate now. That seems to be a no-go area. Central banks are facing their core mandate, which is price stability and exchange rate stability. And this is what they are doing. If you don't increase rates, you are faced with a number of challenges, and many people will criticize such central bank for not doing the needful. IMF, though, is warning that there is need for Nigeria to do a number of things, that monetary measure may not be enough, and also we need to ensure that Nigeria is not dollarized. That is conversation for another day. But to increase rates is one major option that is very tempting for any central bank right now, and I think Nigeria Central Bank may not be an exemption. And many people will ask, upon all the, we have seen inflation, we have seen NPR grow from 11.5%, 13%, 14%, 15.5%, and rather than inflation going down, inflation has continued to increase. Honestly, the answer is very clear. It's not that central bank don't want inflation to have a U-turn or to start going down, but there seems to be more forces combining, resulting in inflation. Central bank governor made a submission that over 25%, over 80%, I beg your pardon, of money in circulation are not within the banking sector, which means our policy is directly impacting 20%. That is worrisome. So before we can see an effective policy in terms of monetary policy coming from adjustment of NPR, CRR, and so on and so forth, we first need to deal with this issue of ensuring that monies that are within the money that are in circulation, currency in circulation, can be captured effectively by the banks. And how do we do that? Central Bank has made moves to say most of these monies that we are going to have currency redesign for high currency, high denominations, which includes 200, 500, and 1,000. Hopefully, when this is done, we are going to have a positive impact.
What else do you think can stop this inflation, really? Paul, do you think that this inflation can really be stopped? Because it seems to be on the runway and it's accelerating so fast. By this time last year, inflation was at 15.99%. And this year, that is October 2021, inflation was at 15.99%. In fact, by this time last year, inflation fell from September to October at 15.99%. Yes, but today we're talking 1 year later, we're singing a different song in the negative, 21.09%. So what can be done to stop this inflation? I heard you when you said perhaps this new currency that will be put into the system, launched by President Buhari in just, let's say, in about a month's time, may have its own impact on stopping inflation. But what other things can be done to stop this inflation?
There are exogenous factors that we cannot control, except and unless we can enter the mind of Putin, because nobody can enter the mind of Putin, not even American president. Putin has continued to expand his influence and powers in terms of war in Ukraine, and this has contributed largely to not less than 30% of global inflation factors. And it's not just in Nigeria. You could see many Nigerians are quote and unquote jackparing. They are leaving the country, going to other countries, and please quote this word in the near future. In 2 to 3 years, maybe not all, but significant number of those that are leaving will still come back to Nigeria. And I can tell you the reason, because the markets they are going to, as new entry, many employers will want to employ some of them, or even not most of them. The reason is because the people that are working in those countries are also disgruntled with the current pay. Nigerians coming from a cheaper economy, we see those monies that we earn as attractive. And when they leave, even though it may serve as brain drain in the short term, but in the medium term, they will be faced with reality of living standards. As the living standard and the cost of living gets more expensive there, and the pay is not increasing because of the reason why they are employed at the first instance, they will look back at home. And hopefully, if we get it right in 2023, which is a factor that we cannot decide now, if we get it right in 2023, there will be some level of stability in our economy, and most of the people that are leaving will come back. So most of these people that are coming, that are going now, prayer will not be sufficient to stop them. What will be sufficient to stop them is to put faith back in Nigeria, and that will be when we elect right leaders and we make right policy. So the external factors, especially the war going on in Ukraine, is contributing at least 30% to inflation figure. Insecurity has its own contribution. Poor infrastructure has its own contribution. Then monetary, all of these things I've mentioned, what they are all under fiscal. So, but we need to go beyond economic theory to say monetary authority must always combat and fight inflation. There are some that are under trade. What is happening around the world is a trade function. And when you look at your exchange rate today, what is happening in parallel market and what is happening at official window, we can no longer deny that parallel market exists. When EFCC went after parallel market and its news was out, whether fake or original, yet to be proven though, that if you have USD below certain number of years, we saw how Naira staged a comeback against the dollar. It was sporadic. The gain was massive. I wish that would continue, but it was truncated it was short-lived. But EFCC made a lot of efforts, and we have also seen what that news has done in the market. We only hope it will continue. So, but that has told us, or those factors have informed us that there are responsibilities that government must perform outside the Central Bank or Monetary Policy Committee. And if they don't do those, if they don't perform those responsibilities, aka what the fiscal authority must do and what trade authorities must do to complement what Central Bank of Nigeria must do, it will not be it will not be business as usual, and it will not be blame game. If you don't do this, I'm afraid it will be very difficult for MPR to adjust, for us to be using MPR, CRR, and liquidity ratio to adjust the inflationary figure. It will just be fighting and fighting and fighting. Yes, in the short and medium term, we might see what this Naira design would do, which I'm very hopeful that it will give us positive results. But in the long term, honestly, I doubt if we don't have monetary authorities contributing and fiscal authority contributing to all of this, having the kind of difference and change that we want to see.
I like that you brought in that component of the news. And I must say at this time that it is a false claim. In fact, someone sent it to me on WhatsApp some days ago, that the news that was making round that the USA is to checkmate dollars in Africa for a currency that is dollar printed below 2021. And from my sources, and I've also checked, it's fake. And, it's a false claim, really, because if you take a look at the story, Paul, you know what I'm saying. I don't know if you saw the story. IMF currency. IMF does not print currency. When I just read it, I was like, where is this coming from? IMF does not even have a department like that. IMF does not print any currency. The director of currency in IMF, I was like, that is really, and of course, what I owe our viewers here is to tell them what the truth is. I shouldn't be part of those peddling all those kind of stories, because once I just see that, I'm like, this is not true. Definitely, But moving over to what you've just said, and let me take it a step further in terms of, let's take a look at the impact of flooding in Nigeria. Over 30 states, the impact. How do you think that this will affect food inflation moving forward? We are now in November. A lot of rice farms submerged under the floods, even other farmlands that are not just even about rice production and all of that. How do you see inflation as we move towards the end of the year? Do you think we're going to hit like the 21.5% mark by the end of this year? Also bearing in mind that just Christmas is also around the corner.
Well, I would not want to just quote numbers as economists, but I would like to make it as simple as possible for those that may be listening to us or may watch this video further. What people used to eat during Christmas and for New Year celebration, which is more like a culture now in Nigeria beyond a religion, is rice. And I can tell you that the price of rice increased from 27,500 before the flood to now 33,000 at factory price. At the market price, which is retail price, from 28,500 to about 35 in some markets, and in some other markets, it went as high as 40,000. What's changed? Not the price of diesel, it remained at over 800 per liter. Not the price of logistics, no, it remains the same. What was different is supply side. Flood submerged most of the farms in the north central, northwest, and northeast, where you get most of the rice output from. Even in south, even in some part of southeast, that you can get rice from. So what it means is that for those that used to consume perhaps a module of rice as a family during Christmas, and if their income has not increased, they will now be consuming less, which means the price of rice has increased and their purchasing power has significantly reduced because of inflation. And there is high tendency that this purchasing power will further reduce because of flood. So this again is not what monetary authority can control, because when you now say you want to cut money supply, that means people will not even have enough money to buy, and that may not necessarily affect the supply of such food, because they have to produce in the first instance, and it's an essential commodity. What it means, therefore, is that Nigerians should be prepared for higher prices in the price of commodities, consumption, and so on and so forth. Flood led to scarcity of fuel in most northern states, because the link between the north and the south, one of the major links between the north and the south, Lokoja, was submerged for days. And up until now, we are just seeing relief in supply of PMS in Nigeria, in Abuja, which is the nation's federal capital. Now, as you are seeing that, before now, what you are seeing in Nasarawa, the price of PMS increased significantly from 180 something to over 200 if you want to buy without queue. If not, you are going to lose time, and time, they say, is money. So whether we like it or not, it affected prices, and it continued to affect prices. And I hope that authorities, especially state governments, will learn from the last flood that we have experienced, that another 365 days will come. Are we still going to have another flood? I remember that the last administration under President Jonathan set up a committee on flood and disaster management with their office in Asokoro. But after that flood happened in 2013 or 2012, we have not really seen any improvement. President Buhari has also intervened in the matter of flood, but this flood continued to occur. Some have said it's because of excess rain. Some have said people living along the drainage lines. Some have said because Cameroon has released, but though government have come to debunk that well, there is this agreement between Nigeria and other countries that we must honor. But beyond that, how have we been able to provide a succor, a protection of some sort, such that if this happened 2023, with new government in place, we will not see sporadic increase in prices, and we are going to have a living standard and cost of living remain the same without us having issues as we're experiencing today.
Okay, Paul, I think we'll leave it at that for now. I know inflation is such, a very deep topic, different layers, but I know we don't have time, and we'll continue to look at it. Next Monday and Tuesday is the MPC meeting, so at least for the next few days on the show. And, I think generally people would also be taking a look at what the Apex Bank MPC would come up with, and the different dimensions of inflation, how they will combat it, and most importantly, how Nigerians will cope with this inflation. It's a tough time now, and I don't want to be an angel of doom, and I know that the tough times are still ahead. So thank you very much, Paul, for joining us from Dubai today.
We also commend the MPC. If the MPC had not increased NPR, you can look at what Kenya has inflation, Ghana has inflation, and so on and so forth. So what some of the policies we have had is not that they did not have impact at all. It's just that the forces that is pulling inflation up is more than the forces that wants to pull it down. So we should tell other government, other agencies to support central bank, namely the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, and most importantly, most importantly, the Ministry of Trade and Investment. It is not for SMEs, it's for import and export. Please, let's tell Ministry of Trade, they should go beyond small business plans and so on and so forth to improve the value of Naira. Ministry of Trade and Investment must understand their role. Beyond sugar import, we should have gotten to sugar sufficiency by now, based on what that ministry projected some years ago. We are still importing everything sugar. No local production, none as at the last report by the same agency. There is no way we will continue to import sugar to drink, for beverages. Imagine everywhere. And we are expecting the value of inflation to come down. So this will go beyond central bank. And even though many people will continue to blame central bank, because what we expect central bank to do is to also speak up that the support needed from other agencies of government is not coming. And it will not come if you don't speak to it. If you are importing all your sugar, you are importing salt, you are importing things that you must use on daily basis, and we have projection that we should have reached sufficiency. Only the president can give license to sugar. Other players want to play in the market. They have been debarred from entering to the market. There's just no way we are going to have progress as a nation, and we'll continue to battle with inflation on daily basis.
Thank you very much, Paul, for your time today. Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, I've been speaking with Paul Alaje, who is the lead economist at SPM. Our professionals who've been looking at inflation in Nigeria.